Hello, writers. Welcome to session 4 in our test prep unit. Have you ever watched gymnastics at the Olympics? Let's watch this quick clip about some gymnastics techniques.
In gymnastics, we do lots of big tricks, flips, and skills. So it's really important that we learn how to land safely to protect us from injury and make sure we get those winning points. So in gymnastics, when doing our landing positions, it's really important that our knees are soft and we're anticipating the landing before it happens. But it's also important that our legs are strong enough to withstand the landing so we don't topple over. Let's look at these girls having their attempts. You can see, firstly, that they're working on a sprung floor, so make sure you do this in the comfort of your gym with your coach. When they go to their landing positions, we can see that their knees are shoulder width apart, their hips are pressed back, and their arms are forwards to counteract the balance from the hips pushing back. From here, they circle their arms behind them, and this is the stretch that the judges will see. High five. Fabulous. And you guys, make sure you keep working hard, and I'll see you next time.
So if you've noticed, they train and practice really hard, but they also know they earn more points for certain things like sticking at the landing and pointing their toes. Gymnasts know how judges will score them, so they are able to practice with that in mind. You might be saying, what does this have to do with taking a test? Well, we know how test writers score things, so we can practice with that in mind. Think about some of those checklists we've already used this year, especially during baby literary essay. They've always been a tool to help you improve your writing. Today is going to be the same. So today I want to teach you that test takers often find out how their answers will be scored and use that information to self-assess and improve their responses. So again, let's start by reviewing our strategies for answering test questions. Read all parts of the question. Read and reread the question. Pay attention to key parts like the word why, or what is the questioning word? And remember, if it's the word why, you're going to need the word because or in order to in your answer. Answer the question. Skim the passage for details to support your answer twice. And good test takers always keep in the back of their mind, what is the question asking? And what evidence will I need to find? So let's try it together. Again, we're going to review the story, Digging for Dinos.
Digging for Dinos. Introduction. While on vacation with his parents and digging for dinosaur fossils, Benny makes a surprising discovery. Young boys are not the only creatures who lose teeth. Digging for dinosaurs was hot work. Benny sat back on his heels and took a long drink from his water bottle. At first, when Mom and Dad had told him they were going on a dinosaur dig for vacation, he'd been excited. He'd brag to his friends and he'd find the skeleton of a never-before-discovered dinosaur. The Benosaurus, they'd probably name it. But the real dig wasn't at all what he'd expected. For starters, he wasn't even digging. No shovels, Dave the paleontologist in charge told them. Any dinosaur bones buried here should be within a couple of feet of the surface. We don't want to risk clunking around and breaking them. Then he'd handed out ice picks and paintbrushes and showed everyone how to chip and brush away sand and dirt, slowly and carefully, a little bit at a time. The most important thing is knowing where to look, Dave said. Some rocks aren't old enough to have dinosaur bones. Other rocks are too old. We've studied this area before and found lots of fossils, so I'm hopeful you'll find some too. Well, that had been 2 days ago, and so far the most exciting thing Benny had found was that his front tooth was loose. He wiggled it now. If he couldn't find any dinosaur bones, at least he could show his friends back home that he lost another tooth. Dave crouched beside Benny. "How's it going?" he asked. "Okay," Benny said. It didn't seem very nice to say that he was bored, This is pretty slow. Dave nodded. Yep, he agreed. It's hard work. Sometimes paleontologists and fossil hunters look for weeks without finding anything, and we hardly ever find a whole skeleton, he added. You know, Ben, if you're tired of searching, you can always help someone else on the crew. Benny looked around the dry, rocky hillside. Dave's assistants were busy taking photographs and drawing pictures and making charts. Some were using GPS devices to make maps of the area. Some were writing in notebooks. Dave said it was important to take good field notes, to record exactly what you did and where you were when you looked for fossils. Benny thought holding the GPS tool might be fun, but he wasn't giving up. I'll keep looking, he said. But, he added, thinking out loud, the pictures always showed dinosaurs in swampy places. Did they live in deserts too? Ah, said Dave. Some probably did, but not around here. Millions of years ago, this wasn't desert. It was wet and green and lush. The Earth's changed a lot since the time of the dinosaurs. Dave slapped Benny on the back and got to his feet. Keep up the good work, Ben, he said encouragingly. I think today will be your lucky day. Pick, chip, brush, and sweep. Benny bent over his patch of rocky ground and carefully cleared away the sand and gravel. When he needed a break, he wiggled his loose tooth. The sun climbed higher and hotter in the sky. He was getting into the rhythm of things. Either that or the heat was just making him drowsy. And then it happened. My tooth, Benny said, surprised. He stared down at the dirt. My tooth, Benny whooped. My dinosaur tooth. I found a real live dinosaur tooth. Dave hurried over to look, careful not to disturb the ground in front of Benny's find. Well, I'll be, he said. It's a tooth, all right. What kind is it? Benny said excitedly. Is it T-Rex? Apatosaurus? Triceratops? Dave laughed, but he kept studying the fossil in the ground. Well, Ben, he finally said, I've seen a lot of dinosaur teeth, but this one's different. I think you may have found one we haven't seen before. Good job.
Great, now that digging for dinos is fresh in your brain, what do paragraphs 8 and 9 show about Benny? Use 2 details from the story to support your responses. So here's an example response right here. Paragraphs 8 and 9 show that Benny was hardworking. One detail that shows this was Benny thought holding the GPS might be fun, but he wasn't giving up. Another detail was that he worked for a very long time. So, I know from Baby Literary Essay that I want to make sure I have a response that answered the question and I include at least 2 details. So let's see if our sample answers the question and has at least 2 details. So let's see. I would say I could give him a point for answering the question. Paragraphs 8 and 9 show that Benny was hardworking. That matches the question. What do paragraphs 8 and 9 show about Benny? Let's see. Benny thought holding the GPS might be fun, but he wasn't giving up. That is a direct quote from the text. So I think he could get a half a point there for that detail. Another detail was that he worked for a very long time. I don't think that would get you any points. It's not very text-based, and so it's not going to get any credit. I would need to go back to my text and actually pull out another detail if I wanted to get that strong score of a 2. Let's try another one. In digging for dinos, why is Benny disappointed with the dinosaur dig? Use 2 details from the story to support your answer. So here's our other sample. Benny was disappointed in the dinosaur dig because it was boring. According to the text, the real dig wasn't at all what he'd expected. Another example was when he got tired from the sun. So take a second to think, is this a strong answer? What would you score it? Yeah, as it stands right now, I would probably give it a 1.5. They answer the question, and they have a really strong detail. According to the text, the real dig wasn't at all what he'd expected. How do you think this writer could have made their answer better? One thing they might have been able to do was go back and find another text-specific detail. So another example was he got tired from the sun. That did happen, but it's not as specific as the text made it. So in the text, if they had pulled out the words, the heat was making him drowsy, that would have pushed this all the way to a super strong to answer because they have two details from the text. So your job today, you're going to go back and look at your responses from sessions 2 and 3. Hopefully you have a few of them to look at. And you're going to score your responses on the short response practice checklist. So 1 point for I wrote an answer that answered the question, a half point for I included a specific detail from the text to support my answer, and another half point for I included a second specific detail from the text to support my answer. So that perfect score is going to be a 2. If you cannot honestly score yourself a 2, use this time to revise your work to make your answer stronger. You want to see how many of your answers you can push all the way to a 2. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to go off and work on this. If you finish and you can honestly say that all of your answers are strong and a 2, you can work on your reading stamina, and then we'll come back together for a share. So let's hear some of the responses that you made super strong today. And one thing I want you to think about was, did you use transitional phrases? And we've done a lot of work with this year. Here are some examples that you might want to include when you're answering test questions. Words like, for example, also, another detail, and the text says. All right, writers, awesome job today.